As a family, we love nature and the outdoors. But if my asthma is uncontrolled, it makes my day-to-day life very difficult. Over 700,000 Kiwis suffer from respiratory illnesses, and $7 billion is the cost to treat this. I was shocked to find out that our building code allows us to build the most unhealthiest home legally.
I'm a designer, and after the Christchurch earthquakes, we got tipped out of our house, and bit of an unwanted experiment. We saw how living in unhealthy rental accommodation affected the health of our children, and one in particular developed quite serious issues and asthma and things, and we just realised that this is the way pretty much half of the population is living, and it's not okay, and we need to do something about changing that.
Well, I can tell you now, when I came into this role, I knew nothing about asthma. So I had no idea, I haven't really been around asthma. And so I was expecting to learn a lot about the respiratory system and about inhalers and things like that. Never did I think that I was going to have to become a building scientist. It wasn't until I started hearing my nurses talk about the homes that they've just come out of. You know, homes that were so cold, they were complaining because they were so cold they had to wear 2 puffer jackets. You know, they were going into children's bedroom and recording temperatures of 7 degrees, 9 degrees. And I was starting to listen to this and thinking, this is crazy. This is, you know, this is really not right. And then I got a call from the young mama out in Papakura, just beside herself. 2 young kids, born healthy, now with chronic conditions. And so that was what had me realise Asthma New Zealand's mission is a 50% reduction in hospitalisation from asthma by 2029. And I looked and I was listening to this and thinking, we have to jump on board with this issue of our housing in New Zealand, because otherwise trying to achieve that mission is like filling up a bathtub without a plug-in.
So I'm an asthmatic, and my experience with living in damp homes, mainly the house we lived in Auckland, that had a direct effect on my health, and I spent a lot of time on heavy medication, and it wasn't good. It wasn't for years. We spent 4 years in a damp and mouldy home, and never again do I want to be going through that.
Yeah, so I guess I've got eczema, and while we were living in that house, I had a relapse of my eczema and ended up kind of like Toby on quite strong medications as well. And I think we didn't even realise until we'd left that house what a direct effect it did have on our health. And it's quite scary looking back now. And there's a lot of people in this country in a similar position.
I've been astounded to know that so many people live in housing that is unfit for human habitation. I think the thing that probably tipped me over the edge was when I learnt that New Zealand has been put on notice by the World Health Organization and the United Nations for being breach of Article 25.1. That article states that everybody is entitled to live in a home that keeps them and their families healthy. And so when I learned that we've knowingly, government after government have been in breach of that, that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for me personally, and from an Asthma New Zealand perspective, because we represent 700,000 Kiwis that live with respiratory disease.
So the current building code today is essentially the worst home that you can legally build, and I don't think many people actually realise this.
Good question. Building standards in New Zealand are around 20 to 25 years behind most other OECD countries, and particularly UK and Europe. We're about where their insulation standards, for example, were back in the mid-90s. And even countries with warmer climates, like places like California, their insulation levels are 3 times what ours are in New Zealand. So we've kind of got left behind, and for decades our standards have been too low, and there's been practically no change, whereas other countries annually, biannually, they up their standards and update their codes in the important areas that matter.
I think it is foolish of us to put monetary value on the cost of our poor housing, because the value to New Zealand is far greater than that, the cost. Asthma doesn't just take away breath, it steals dreams, hopes, aspirations of our future generations, but it steals talent from New Zealand, and that's the cost that we should be talking to. Because when we use money, it's a fool's gold. And of course, most of us that refer to money live in privileged positions. We need to start talking about the soft cost that changes the course of a life forever.
$7 billion is the cost to our health system of treatment of respiratory problems. Every $1 spent on better quality, warm, dry, healthy homes saves $4 for our national health system. So it kind of makes a lot of sense. And then, you know, if we did all live in healthy homes, there'd be 30% less hospital admissions. Yeah, so it's kind of a no-brainer.
Given the fact that we need to be building many more houses, please let us not keep building houses to a building code that allows us to build the unhealthiest house that we can do legally. It doesn't make sense. In 40 years' time, somebody else is going to be sitting in this chair saying what I'm saying. And I think that would be the greatest insult to all of the so-called adults that are responsible for fixing this problem right now in 2021. What legacy are we leaving for our future generations? Because if it's more of the same, then that's not a legacy.